Thanks to Sega Atlus, I got the opportunity to play the opening hours of Raidou Remastered, and I am so much more excited for this game than I was initially. I was already looking forward to this. I'm a big fan of SMT, but this was one of the games that I missed out on back when it released on the PS2, and I just never got around to giving it a shot. And now, after having gotten a chance to play a bit more of it, it is immediately one of my highest priorities to play right away in June. As I mentioned, I was able to play the first few hours of this game. The whole thing is divided into an episode structure, and I basically played the first two episodes, doing the plot for those, as well as some side missions as well. One thing I do want to clarify is the gameplay you're seeing as part of this video is not captured from my own gameplay. This is supplied footage, but it does match up visually with the kind of experiences I had playing on my PC, so no worries there. Now, before I dive into talking about my experiences with the remaster specifically, I do want to talk about the game being remastered here, because it is something honestly very different from the greater Shin Megami Tensei franchise that it's a part of. Two big things that I think really set it apart, and that's the gameplay style and the setting. Gameplay style side of things, the vast majority of SMT titles, whether that's mainline games or Persona or some of the other spin-offs that have happened like Digital Devil Saga, they're usually turn-based RPGs, which the Raidou games are not. These are real-time action games that are still RPGs, where you level up your main character and your demons, you customize your loadout, and the way that combat and exploration intermingle is still the same as you'd see in a lot of turn-based RPGs, where you run into enemies on the exploration map and then are suddenly transported into the actual battle arena where you'll be doing combat. Once you're fighting though, instead of taking turns and entering commands, you are instead having full-blown real-time action combat where you're able to run around and jump, you can use melee attacks, ranged attacks, and give commands to your demons. Meanwhile, on the setting side of things, a big thing that draws this one apart from other SMT games is that normally SMT games take place roughly modern day. Sometimes it's near future or, post-apocalyptic, but where society hit roughly where we are right now. That is not the case for Raidou, which instead takes place in Taisho 20, which is actually not a real year that existed. The Taisho period in Japan only lasted for 15 years. So this is an alternate history that's taking place in the 1930s, which is not a setting you really see explored much in many games. Even when it comes to games taking place in Japan, normally, if we're doing things that aren't present day, is usually going much further back. 1930 is just a year that doesn't really get a lot of exploration in video games, and so that is something that always stands out to me a little bit of just, this is taking place in a particular era that we just don't really get to see very often. Now, getting into my experiences with the remaster, one of the immediate things I want to highlight about this game is just how good it looks. Not that the original version of Raidou released on the PS2 was a bad-looking game, but it was a PS2 game. There were limitations to that, and the job here, honestly, they're calling it a remaster, but it might as well be a remake, at least visually. The way the backgrounds now come to life with full 3D designs, the job on polishing up all the character models while still maintaining their original art style. It is just a game that looks like something that would be a good, brand new, higher production game, not necessarily something that's just cleaning up and remastering something that released almost 20 years ago. Now, the setup for this game is that it's the 1930s, and your main character has just successfully completed an exam to become the newest Devil Summoner, bearing the title Raidou Kuzunoha the 14th. And while a lot of older SMT games tend to have plot that I think sticks in the background a little bit more, or is a bit more bare bones with a heavier emphasis on philosophical debates that takes place within them, the Raidou games are an exception to this. There is a very strong story structure that is happening right out the gate with the title, where again, it's broken down into this whole episode structure that all plays into this detective story that you'll be solving over the course of the game. Each episode has its own main case you'll be focusing on, but it all plays a role into the building of the overarching main story, basically a TV show format. During the game's more exploration-focused phases, you run around talking to different NPCs, trying to get information of where you need to be exploring, or, what is the next step in your case. One of the things that is interesting is how they actually do tie the demons into this aspect as well, where not only are you using them in combat, but they come in handy while talking to people as well. Demons can have different support abilities that activate to help solve certain problems, whether that's having them read someone's mind that's maybe not giving you information that you want them to, being able to fly so they can help you reach something and grab an item that you could couldn't reach on your own, and there's even segments where you actually take direct control of the demon and will run around as them to do things that the main character just can't. Combat, though, is definitely the main bread and butter of where demons are useful and where, well, most of the actual just raw fun of this game comes from outside of the storytelling. The real-time combat isn't the most complex, but I think it hits a really nice, satisfying flow of how you have to solve different problems. Basically, you have two different melee attacks, a weak one and a strong one. The weak attack, more importantly, isn't just a way of dealing fast attack damage, but also recharges your MP, which is what you use to fuel all of your demon's abilities. So you want to be using that very often to top up as often as possible, and while you are full up, or at least close to it, you can focus more on the slow, heavier attacks that are going to be your main source of damage. Aside from your sword, you also have a gun attack that is technically infinite ammo, but you do have to wait a bit between shots in order for it to fully recharge. And this isn't really a major form of damage dealing unless an enemy is weak to guns, but rather the main benefit is you can use it to stun enemies while your demons can take care of doing other things, just kind of hold someone off if you don't want them to be actively a problem. And then your main character can also learn a select number of special spells and special attacks that they can be equipped with and use as well. Now, something that tends to play a pretty big role in most of the combat for SMT games is hitting enemy weaknesses, and Raidou is no different. The way it works in this real-time aspect is that when an enemy is hit by something they're weak against, normally from one of your demons casting a spell, but maybe from one of Raidou's abilities as well, they are temporarily stunned, and during that phase, not only are they just not doing anything except getting hit, but during that time, any light attacks they're hit with are going to generate double the MP, and heavy attacks are going to deal 1.5 times damage. So it's a really great way of just recovering your MP quickly or dishing out as much damage as you can. In the case of bosses, you're not going to be able to just stun lock them repeatedly by hitting them with their weakness. Instead, they have the special shield meter so that you have to keep hitting them with their weakness to break it down to a certain extent, and then finally, once that's down, they're stunned, you can take advantage of it, and you just wash, rinse, repeat that. Now, when it comes to your demon companions, you don't have direct control of them in terms of like actually being able to pick what specific moves you want them to use in combat, but instead they rely on AI that you're able to give very simple commands to. You can tell them to not use skills, you can tell them to use skills freely, and generally, at least based on the little bit of time I've played with them, their AI is smart enough that they know, oh hey, this enemy's weak to a move I know, I'm gonna spam that move as much as I possibly can. Or, in the case of a demon that knows a healing spell, if you or one of your demons are getting pretty low, they'll make sure to cast a healing spell on you. You're able to have two demons out at the same time, and you can freely swap them in combat, so whenever, there's a change of pace where you do need to break a healer out, or maybe there is an enemy that shows up with a new weakness type, so you have to bring out a demon that's suitable for that, you're able to adjust on the fly to what the situation demands for, and just like all the other big SMT games, you are of course able to take these demons, fuse them together, make brand new ones, and have a party that's going to help you cover a variety of different situations. One other demon command I do want to highlight real quick is that you also have the ability to temporarily make them invincible. You basically just tell them to back off so they go invisible, can't get hurt by any attacks, but they're not going to do anything either. This primarily comes up in the case of boss fights where enemies can have very strong attacks that you can't just really hope your demons are going to naturally figure out how to dodge. Basically, once those attacks are telegraphed, you put your demons away and you just focus on your own mobility to make sure you don't get hit by attacks. And then one final thing about combat I want to highlight is that new to the Remastered, there are some new special attacks you can perform as part of the game as well, including new super moves that are charged up from just consistently hitting enemy weaknesses and just doing things in combat. This isn't the fanciest action combat out there, but for being an action RPG and the way it intermingles with how you pick and choose what demons you want to use, and needing to alternate between your offensive options as well as sometimes needing to go on the defensive, I think comes together to form a very fun and engaging form of combat. You don't necessarily have to worry about things like how to do proper combos or know things about timed inputs, but as long as you're making sure to alternate between your light and heavy attacks and have the right demons out for the right situations, you're going to be able to bulldoze your way through a lot of regular enemies while still having to be a bit more careful with some bosses because some of their attacks can be very nasty if you're unprepared and don't take the proper precautions to actually avoid and dodge them. It's worth noting on that end, the game does have multiple difficulty options. I played on the standard difficulty, but there is a more difficult one if you want an even greater challenge, an easier one, and then basically a story mode style one where everyone is invincible, they're never gonna die, and you don't have to really worry about combat other than the time it takes to take an enemy down and then move the story forward. All in all, I very much enjoyed my time with this game. Like I said at the beginning, this is one of those titles that I just missed out on. Even though I've really enjoyed the SMT franchise, I just didn't get the chance to play this one back on the PS2, back when it was originally releasing. And having been able to now soak some time into the opening hours, the combat is fun and satisfying. I think there's a lot of interesting things that play into which demons you want to carry around with you at all times, not just for how they can solve combat situations, but how they can be useful for the exploration aspects of the game. And I am personally a sucker for mysteries and detective stories, and so the main plot playing out in that style is something where I immediately want more answers and need to play through the rest of it as soon as I possibly can. I think one of the biggest things I really do want to highlight about this game is that if you are a fan of RPGs, but greater SMT-style games never really appealed to you, this might be one worth giving another look at. The change in setting, the real-time combat, the much heavier story-driven style structure is just a lot of things that I think can make for a game that, you know, if you're a fan of SMT games, this is just one more to give a look and enjoy, but if you haven't really vibed with the other games, but there are certain aspects of them that appeal to you, like maybe capturing demons and fusing them together, well, this is going to be a very different style of game where you can get some of those aspects, but maybe in a package that is just more appealing to you. The full game will be releasing on June 19th. Depending on where you live, it'll actually be a little earlier than that on PC. With Steam, you can get it as early as like late on the 18th. It's going to be available on PC via Steam, along with current Xbox systems, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, the original Switch, and the Switch 2 as well. If you enjoyed this video and you actually want to hear maybe a little bit more about it, I actually have a longer format version of my thoughts of this over on the podcast that I'm a part of called Party Chat, a JRPG podcast that I've been doing with my buddy Cameron Hawkins. You can see the video version of that here on YouTube as well. I'll have it linked at the end, or you can listen to it on your podcasting platform of choice. As always, again, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all later.